Hello, I'm Kieran, and this is the reading of Chapter 8 of Greenlight Medical Anatomy of Kindness by Lunashore on AO3. Chapter 8, MIA -2. Izuku breathed out. The clinic was quiet so far, but that could have been attributed to the early hour of the night. His patients tended to start to trickle in just after 1 a.m. Right now, it was midnight. He just hoped no one came in too injured or hanging on life by a thread like his current resident patient had. It would be a pain to set up another bed in his room and carry someone up there again. Izuku did have some muscle on him, courtesy of carrying heavy wares for the cafe day by day, helping vigilantes nearly double his weight to walk, or occasionally just straight up having to fight his patients when they got out of control by night. But carrying them was his least favorite thing to do. Up dimly lit stairs, struggling to get his key out and unlock the apartment door, opening the other lock to the recovery room, and manhandling the patient onto the bed, all while keeping the patient from hitting anything, their body supported, and being mindful of their mutations and injuries. It was tiring and annoying. Of course, it was time-consuming too, but he wouldn't complain about that. He dedicated his time willingly to helping other people, so that actually brought him joy. The only negative would be if he was up in the apartment and would not notice another patient waiting on him, like that one time. But, oh well. Right now it was quiet and Izuku just had to sort out other matters. First, ordering supplies for the clinic. He was slowly running out of bandages and gauze, so a week should have him running on empty. He had to restock his signature treatment. He had used up the version he had mixed himself with his current patient, who he knew now as Blank, emptying his reserves of the strong, yet probably mostly safe medicine of that kind. The safety of the medicine wasn't yet determined, but it was a necessary risk to take. Blank had lost a lot of blood, and his injuries were fatal in this state. While carrying him inside, he had already realized that the man was on the verge of death, and a healing quirk would be the only thing that could save him. Izuku might be quirkless, but there's a reason his patient called him a miracle worker and always came back to him instead of taking the risk of a hospital. He was somehow able to mend even the biggest injuries. So because he didn't know much, or really anything, about Blank at the point, he had administered his own concoction into the veins of the patient that came to him. It was experimental, and he had only used it once before, but he had been confident in his creation. And it worked. But back to his tasks. The time to be amazed by his success would be later. He clicked away on his tablet, putting in an order, organizing it to reach the right person, and there. Bandages should arrive by Saturday, and now knowing his treatment worked, it should take about 3 months to curate it again in a small dosage. The only thing left to do would be to contact Blank's person, and then the call that he had scheduled for afterwards. He glanced at the burner phone laying next to him in the armchair. Blank called their emergency contact nearly 2 hours ago, handed him the phone, and only answered a short yes when asked if he would be picked up by them, once he came back and promptly passed out from exhaustion again. Izuku had examined the unconscious body afterwards to ascertain the effectiveness of the treatment and when he would be sent home. He determined that Blank either had to stay another 3 days or be put in the care of his emergency contact for 2 weeks. In his own care, he could administer different treatment to help heal faster. Relying on the contact, he would have to fully count on the remnants of his medication coursing through Blank's bloodstream to heal the rest. And of course, then an examination afterwards. He contemplated what phone to use for the message, or maybe even a call. No, a call was out of the question. Blank was a new patient, and obviously Izuku had assumed he was a vigilante and treated him. But he wasn't about to hand out the main number of the Greenlight network to just anyone who dropped in. And he didn't feel like getting infiltrated by villains. Thank you very much. But then, at the same time, Blank knew the clinic's address from Raven. Then the other currently out-of-order vigilante must have already run a background check. He made a grab for the network phone and brought it in front of his face. Izuku referenced the burner phone as he typed in the phone number of the last call. Alright, standard greeting, without stating a name of the patient in case the line is unsafe. Not asking for the name of the contact directly while they're on the phone, or it might scare them off. Okay, Here he goes. The phone rings once, twice, then 3 times, and the line connects. Shota, is that you? Izuku pulled a face. Well, there goes his plan about keeping the secret identity of a patient secret from himself. But, oh well, he wouldn't be a so-called professional if he couldn't ignore that slip-up. He cleared his throat gently and made sure his voice changer was sat right. No, I'm afraid not. I am his current attending doctor. Am I speaking to his emergency contact? Izuku did not have to wait long. The call went well, even if the man on the other side sounded a bit confused about the following his instructions and not being called to a hospital. But it sounded like he might be in luck when the emergency contact was willing to cooperate. Izuku was willing to bet his ADU scanner on the fact that the only reason why the emergency contact listened was because he trusted Blink. Or at least that was the impression he got over the call. There's always a risk with emergency contacts if they weren't aware of their friend or partner was doing. One time, they hung up, claiming it was an annoying spam call. The other time wasn't as pleasant, as they threatened to pull together with the police. Oh well, when that happened, everything went over well, and it was in the past now. The contact also apologized with a very gracious donation to the clinic, so there was that. Not even 10 minutes later, there's a knock on the door. Izuku got up quickly, checking himself on the reflection of his turned-off tablet to see his disguise was still in good order, and went to answer. The door swung open, and he was met with a tall blonde man, dressed in dark jeans and a crinkled yellow sweater. His eyes were a vibrant green, even if a little red-rimmed, which was understandable, he supposed, if a person you were close to and went out on their nightly hobby and never returned. There were a lot of concerns that would raise. Izuku suppressed a wince. Yeah, that must have been painful for him. The man peered down with a nervous frown. Are you the one I spoke to on the phone? Ah, smart man. Not saying names while being unsure of who you were talking to. Some of his vigilantes should take a page out of his book. Izuku held out his hand to shake. I am. I'm assuming you are Blank's emergency contact? The man looked a bit confused at the name for a second before nodding quickly and taking his hand in greeting. So it seems this is a case of the contact only being vaguely aware of what their companion was doing at night. He briefly wondered what their relationship to each other was before shoving the curiosity aside. He was supposed to be professional. He can't ask personal questions. Izuku instead put on a signature smile that you could read on the eyes as he stepped inside to signal for the man to come in. He seemed to give himself a shove before straightening and walking in. The teen immediately zeroed in on the manner in which the blonde's eyes swept around the room, the way it seemed calculated, jumping between doors to the counter with different appliances and the collection of tools in the corner. He had seen the way inexperienced people took in the room, and this in comparison was so focused. Maybe a policeman or firefighter or hero? Izuku quickly did a once-over of the other's stance, and sure enough. Yes, he stood relaxed, with his hands fidgeting innocently in front of his stomach, but he wasn't turning his back on any of the doors other than the one he just came from, and he created exactly enough distance for him to still see Izuku beside him and react to an attack if needed. This man was expecting a threat, maybe felt like he was in enemy territory. Yeah, that would make sense. Someone working in public safety, not knowing the full extent of what their presumably friend does, but only knowing it roughly just to be aware. Seems like the trust he bet on goes deeper than expected, and went both ways in their relationship. He didn't know many vigilantes that would trust someone with their secret if the other was from public safety, even if it was their best friend. Izuku sighed and walked past the man. While next to him, he quickly glanced up and tried to calculate his rough height. About 7 or 8 inches taller, something around 6'1". He purposely turned his back to the man to demonstrate that he trusted him. Shit, or would he take that as someone showing that they are in superior power because they're in his territory? Well, maybe he shouldn't have done that. Too late now. He unlocked the door to the stairrail and gestured to the blonde to come closer. The other did so without any hesitation, but His posture was definitely less relaxed now, more tense, and did not step straight but halfway into fighting footing. Yep, definitely public safety. Izuku suddenly felt like a moron with his luck, because how fortunate did you have to be to invite someone in who was probably a cop in your very much illegal clinic? He might just have to hope now that Blank would prevent his contact from rattling out this place to his colleagues. God, he was taking an awful lot of risks these past 2 days. How fun. Please don't let this become a regular thing. He went up the stairs without looking behind him, only hearing quiet steps follow him. Izuku did his best to suppress the shudder and the thought that he was right. The only thing preventing him from arresting the teen was the patient inside his apartment. Izuku fumbled in the half-dark for a moment with his keys before unlocking the apartment door. The room dividers were set up, reshaping his actual living room into a singular hallway with 2 doors, so there was no risk of the cop/firefighter/hero, or whatever, seeing his actual living room and realizing who he was. If any of his patients asked, then he was a friend of the owner's family, getting to use the unused part of the apartment to remain anonymous, so without a paper trail, renting or buying up a space himself. He huffed and realized he had been frozen in front of the doorway. He whirled around and smiled at the contact again, before turning around again and leading down the hallway. He set out to do his usual explaining. As you already heard in the call, Blank is alive. He was admitted into my care with lasting quirk effects, which affected his head in the form of a mild concussion and a stab wound on the side and multiple bullet wounds in the shoulder. He heard the blonde suck in a harsh breath, which, yeah, fair reaction. He continued on. Right now, he's in stable condition. Izuku took off the clipboard hanging off the wall and opened the door, quickly looking at the patient and then the heart monitor, before finishing his sentence with, and is still unconscious. Please be quiet and try not to jostle him too much. He opened the door completely and allowed the man to look inside the room. And then the man probably forgot all of his spiel on being a guard, because at that moment he laid eyes on Blank. He rushed into the room to his bedside and cradled the raven-haired man's face in his hands gently, brushing his messy hair out of his eyes. Izuku averted his eyes. He now bet on them being partners. Best friends usually reacted by grabbing the hand or shoulder first, but he wasn't going to say that. Instead, he opened the door further to make sure the man wouldn't feel trapped once he came back seeing him as a threat, looked at his clipboard again, and began to rattle off the points he had made there. I've controlled the bleeding, removed all foreign objects, and stabilized his breathing. Additionally, performed a small surgery to repair internal damage. The concussion was minor enough that he only needed rest. His injuries should be about 30% healed by now with the help of my quirk. He saw the contact's mouth opening and his head turning vaguely in his direction, but refusing to leave Blank out of his sight. Izuku smiled gently under his mask and predicted the question. You wish to ask about my quirk? The man's jaw snapped shut and nodded numbly, while his arm traveled down to take Blank's hand in his. It's a healing quirk which I only use during emergencies. I'm afraid I can't disclose more for the sake of keeping my identity private. The blonde's eyes widened as if he only now remembered that he was in a regular clinic, and Izuku suppressed a chuckle. I'm sure you understand. Moving on, I am optimistic that he will make a full recovery during the next few days if you leave him in my care, or about 2 weeks while staying home. He clicked his pen 2 times to give the other a brief break and clipped it back on his board. Do you have any questions? He watched as the tall man searched the face of Blank, squeezing his hand before turning towards Izuku. How soon can I take him home? Izuku eased his smile and took the pen from his clipboard, shuffling to a page. Just answer some questions and you'll be free to go. Hisashi was practically shivering from the strangeness of the situation. He had been told to come alone, but of course he didn't. Shota was at an unknown place, only able to say he was safe, and then afterwards he gets a cryptic call telling him to come as soon as he had the time to an address of a cafe. Yeah, he was not doing that on his own. The whole thing screamed danger at him. And here he was now, walking out, completely unharmed of whatever the fuck that was. Sakashi had stayed behind the car, laying on the floor of the back road to not be seen, listening in with the microphone they had clipped to the inside of Izashi's sweater, prepped to go back up at any moment. The car was parked across the street and felt completely exposed as the man who introduced himself as Doctor stayed behind at the corner of the alleyway from which they walked in from, and Hisashi shuffled across the empty street, carrying his husband in his arms. He struggled a little to open up the passenger side door, but managed to do so with a little maneuvering. As soon as the door was opened, he pretended to try and set Shota down, while looking at Tsukauchi in the back row. The piece of coat he saw moved and quickly hissed a warning. "Doctor is still watching, at the corner." The coat settled again. Izashi set Shota down and moved his unconscious form into a more comfortable position, before standing up. Like this, it almost seemed as if nothing unusual happened at all, and his husband was just napping in the car seat after a particularly long day. Alas. He stood up again and faced the alleyway. The doctor stood there, face obscured by a medical mask and shadows. Sashi molded over. The doctor had been friendly with them, had saved Shota's life. Sure, he had no idea what blank thing was about, but it was only curiosity of many. But his point stood, even while it was a little weird, the whole identity thing, and the fact that it was at the back of the cafe. The doctor helped them, and demanded only a point of contact and a checkup appointment in return. Hisashi tried to be optimistic. Maybe this was an actual doctor starting out and didn't have the benefit of having an actual building for it yet. He should be respectful in return. Standing across from the street from them, he bowed quickly and shouted a quiet, "Thank you," before clambering to the driver's seat and starting up the car. Out of the corner of his eye, he saw the doctor waving at them as they drove off and rounded a corner. Tsukauchi groaned as he strained up the back and finally sat down on one of the streets. Izashi risked a glance at his husband beside him. The shock of the situation settled in again. He was alive. He was alive. Tears began gathering in his eyes as he looked at the way Shota's chest lifted and sank again with each breath. "Eyes on the road, idiot. I refuse to get in a car crash now," Tsukauchi mumbled from behind. Izashi laughed in delight and turned back to the street with a wide smile. After all is said and done, thank you for listening.